My marker's in chapter 12, page 301. No, page 302. Learners with exceptionalities. This chapter describes children with exceptionalities and programs that are designed to help them achieve their full potential. Do you know any children with exceptionalities? I don't know what's an exceptionality. Exceptionalities are defined on page 303 as any individual whose physical, mental, or behavioral performance is so different from the average, from the norm, or from average, that additional services are required to meet their needs. So, you know anybody that wears glasses? Yeah, yours truly. So, am I an exceptional person?
Exception.
I mean, in terms of a learner with a disability.
I mean, yeah.
And that's the word. That word exceptionalities means they have some kind of disability. It's like, well, no, lots of people wear glasses. Have you noticed the small letters in this textbook? I've noticed the small letters in this textbook because I have a magnifying glass at home to help me read some of it. Maybe it's the lighting I have where I'm reading it that adversely affects it. But if I'm able to function in a normal classroom, then probably they wouldn't say I have an exception, a capital E, an exceptionality that makes me disabled. You follow that? And he's going to use the word disabilities as we go through here. It's just that the common way to talk about children with disabilities is they are exceptionalities. They need more help than the average or the normal student. They need some extra services if they're going to be successful in school. Which means probably wearing eyeglasses wouldn't qualify. Or even having a hearing aid. Because what's happened is we've done some things to enhance their ability to function in a normal way in the classroom. But if I say, listen, what do you hear?
A clock.
You hear a clock?
Mm-hmm.
I heard somebody typing on a keyboard. Did any of you hear that?
The heater.
I hear a fan running in a furnace. Anybody else hear something?
I think I hear the monitor for the computer.
The computer? I don't hear the clock. I have an exceptionality. My hearing is damaged enough where some of that stuff I don't hear. I don't know, I just don't pick it up. Any individual whose physical, mental, or behavioral performance on page 303 is so different from the norm that additional services are required to meet their needs. So that's a very fine definition. Miss Park is a special ed teacher for the younger grades. This is on page 302. And she teams with the general ed teachers during math and reading to serve all of the second graders who need special services. So the second graders who need special, who can't get math in a normal classroom, have a special ed teacher who comes in during math and what else? Reading, to help, to sit with them and help them comprehend what's going on in class. Sometimes I have actually seen parent volunteers working in classrooms where students, it's called mainstreaming, where the students with special needs, with disabilities are mainstreamed rather than In other words, they can function in a regular classroom a lot of the time, so they don't have to be in a special ed classroom or a special ed school. So those who need some extra help, if they need specialized help, they'll get a special ed teacher. If they just need a little bit of help, some parent volunteers can sit in the classroom and help them sort things out. Even some of them with behavioral problems, just having a parent volunteer who sits next to them and kind of reminds them of what they're to be doing and what's going on, or sits behind them in the classroom. And it makes sense to me to have a parent who has a special need child, if they have the flexibility to be in the classroom, to sit with their child and help them, why not have them there to help that child learn things? So they can take what they see you doing, take it home and reinforce it. For the sake of efficiency, students are grouped into classes and given common instructional experiences. This is from 302, designed to provide the greatest benefit to the largest number at a moderate cost. Does this make you feel good? That if you were paid the same rate as a babysitter, your salary would be about twice of what it is. You go, what? When my daughters were babysitters, and they would go sit with somebody's children while the parents went out to dinner, they would sit with those two children for a couple of hours, 3 hours, say 3 hours. The parents came home and brought them back to our house, and what did they pay them? Did either of you do any babysitting? Did you babysit for 3 hours for some family? And what did they pay you?
A lot. Depending on the family.
What were some of the going rates you got for babysitting?
Anywhere between like $6 and $12 an hour, depending on the family.
So you got, if you were there 3 hours with those two children, you got $24, $24. So if you have two children for 3 hours, you get $24. For 6 hours, that would be $48 for two children. For 24 children, that would be 12 times 36. That would be 360 plus another 72, 430 a day. That would be times 5 days, $2,000 a week. What? Are you going to get paid that much as a teacher?
That would be awesome, but no.
Not any place I know. Babysitters make more money than we do. Just get over it. It's just life, and it's not going to change in your lifetime probably, because our culture is so structured that this is a powerful statement. They're trying to provide the greatest benefit to the largest number at the cheapest cost. So did any of you have a special needs child in a classroom you were in grade school?
Mm-hmm. I always got paired with them because they knew I'd be nice. It'd be
And you would be helpful to them, and what kind of special needs did they have? Did they ever tell you?
There were mental handicaps. Like they just weren't at the same level.
They just
of thinking
couldn't
that
think
we were.
like everybody else does.
And then there were social issues.
And then some that were behavioral. Anybody else have? What'd you have?
Usually I'd go to the public school for like music and stuff, and we had a special needs kids who was in a motorized wheelchair who
Would come
was
to music
mentally
class.
handicapped, and he was
Okay.
I don't know exactly what he had, but he couldn't function on it.
Yeah, and he could come to math class, but he didn't go to PE class. Any of the rest of you say, nope, I haven't had any. Well, you will have some someday. A disability on page 303 that's the technical word for it, is a functional limitation. Reader's Digest says it's a lack of ability, an inability. A handicap is a condition imposed on a person. What? It's a disadvantage that's imposed on those with superior ability. What? Have you ever heard of handicap when people play golf? I've heard of it. What does it mean? Does anyone know?
Mhm.
Have you ever been so good at something that when you played with people who weren't very good, they made you put your hand in your pocket, or you had to bat one-handed or left-handed or something? That's what Reader's Digest is talking about. So if you're really good at something, they handicap you so it gives other people an equal chance to win.
Levels the playing field.
So what happens? Some people come along already with a disadvantage that they can't participate in an equal playing field, so we say they are handicapped, which means they can't achieve or succeed as easily as other people do. Page 304. In a class of 25, a teacher might, on average, have 1 or 2 students with learning disabilities. And those disabilities might be diagnosed and treated, or they might not. And sometimes the benefit of this chapter is so that you can say, okay, one is, can I kind of figure out if somebody does have a disability, and if it looks like someone does have, what kind of services are out there that I could help them find to help give them a better chance of surviving in a school where they've grouped all these people in this one room. So that's probably the biggest benefit of reading through this chapter. Only about 1 class in 40 will have a child with a hearing or vision or a physical disability, but you'll have 2 or 3 students, or 1 or 2 students in a class of 25 with a learning disability or with a speech impairment. Page 305, students with IQs above 70 are regarded as being in the normal range. If your IQ is below 70, what does that make you?
Handicapped.
Yes, it does. Does anyone know what the word is that used to be used for that? Mentally retarded. And then all the kids started using that as a reference to people they didn't like. And the word is, and if kids are using it on the playground in a derogatory fashion, then probably we shouldn't be using that to refer to a student in our class. That they simply their IQ falls below the normal range. And the book says, don't use IQ alone. Take into account school and home performance and scores on other tests and cultural background. Years ago, a guy gave the graduation lecture at a college in California, and he said, I must confess to you that I was pleased that you were willing to invite a person who was classified in grade school as being mentally retarded to be your graduation, your commencement speaker. And of course there was silence in the room. And here was a guy with obviously a doctor's degree being invited to speak at a commencement at a university. And in California, he was a rather prominent professor out there. And he had their attention real fast. And then he said, I wasn't retarded, but I came from a Spanish-speaking home, and I didn't know English. And when I came to school for the first time, they gave me a test in English, and I couldn't answer the questions.
Hmm.
So they said I had an IQ below 70 and put me in special ed. Is that sad
Hmm.
that that would happen? Now, see, there's a tendency to say, well, that would never happen today. And I'm just telling you. And because once somebody's score falls below 70, people tend to think they can't learn much. They can't do much. And that's not true either. But just be aware of that kind of stuff happening out there. And don't let those people who bark about IQ keep you from that. That was, I told you about the little girl who had a below 70 IQ, and I helped her get her high school credit in algebra
Hmm.
in a legitimate course. I just got a course that I knew was designed one concept on a page that she'd be able to cope with it and work her way through it and get the degree and get the credit finished. What kind of services are available for special ed students? Intermittent services. Come and go to the classroom, special ed teacher, like the beginning of our chapter. Limited and intense support for a limited time period till they kind of get caught up or they figure out or they acquire coping skills. Extensive, which means they're regularly involved, and pervasive, which means they're constantly involved with a special ed teacher. Page 306, teaching adaptive behavior skills. Page 306, what did I say about that page? I said screenshot it. What was on page 306 that I thought you should screenshot it? Oh, if you have a special ed person in your classroom, what are 5 things that you ought to teach them? How to cope with the school routines. See that on page 306? How to develop relationships with other people. How to develop their language skills. How to develop their social emotional. How to kind of learn to be self-regulating. And personal care. How to take care of themselves. That's why I said screenshot that. Page 307. A student who falls more than 2 grade levels behind expectations is likely to be called learning disabled. How could a student fall 2 grade levels behind in school? If he just sits in the corner during math and doesn't say anything, and he just smiles at you every time you look at him, you see how you could keep falling behind?
Hmm.
One summer, I decided, after some of my courses on that I'd taken at university, I decided to offer a summer school program for people in mathematics. And here's what I said: for this 6-week program in math, you will pay the same thing that you would pay for 2 months of school. And if I don't raise your child's achievement test score by 1 grade level, you get your money back.
Hmm.
So I'm going to take a child who's more than 2 grade levels behind in math, and I'm going to spend 6 weeks with him working individually and diagnosing what his weaknesses are and helping him learn to compensate for those weaknesses or teaching him what he needs to know to fill in the blanks. And 6 weeks later, he's going to take his achievement test and be 1 grade level ahead of where he was last year. I had a whole bunch of people jump on that one because they thought this is a giveaway program for the summer, and I only had 1 student that I had to give their money back. The rest of them, I was able to help them. And the parent said, I knew he wouldn't do any work for you, so just keep the money. My wife was glad to have you babysitting him for the summer. So she just paid me like I was a babysitter. And it didn't matter. I could bring applesauce. I could ask him what his favorite candy was and bring it to class. I could do anything to try to get him to do work. And he wasn't defiant. He just wasn't going to do it. He just sat there. And yes, sir, no, sir. He was very respectful to authority. He just wouldn't do any work. first time I ever met someone like that. Oh, are you hoping when you become a teacher that you'll be 100% successful with 100% of your students 100% of the time? Well, I was too. And I would say, go ahead and have that as your ambition. Just don't be devastated when it doesn't work out. Just say, I wasn't able to reach this child. I couldn't make this work. And sometimes people fall behind because they get sick or they've moved a lot and they miss out on some schooling. There's all kinds of reasons. Page 309, children with ADHD. You know any children with ADHD? Okay, are you ready for this? On page 309, listen to what the textbook says. Children with ADHD do not qualify for special education. ADHD is not a disability. Isn't that interesting? But look, unless you also have some other disability. So guess what teachers do if they have an ADHD kid in their classroom and they don't want him there anymore? They try to get him tested by the special ed people, so they'll transfer him to the special ed class so they don't have to put up with it. Because ADHD kids just wear you out. They do. They just wear you out. Have some of you worked with ADHD kids?
Yep.
They just wear you out, right? My wife says, just watching me makes her tired. I'm ADHD. I'll be in a meeting. I'm over there, Dr. Clark, when he was the academic dean, had a meeting, and I'm sitting over there in the meeting, tapping my fingers and tapping my feet. And so you want a bottle of water, Tom? Yeah, good idea. Because now I've got something to touch, and I drink it, and I'm playing with it. Next thing you know, I'm going with the bottle. He goes, Tom, he said, just chill out a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry. And sometimes I don't even know I'm doing that stuff. I've got to bleed off the energy, or I'm going to do what? Explode? I don't know what's going to happen. Now, it's not near as bad now as it was when I was younger. Because I'm just getting old, my body's wearing out. But isn't that amazing that I still have a lot of that stuff going on? So, and I didn't have any other disabilities, so I just had to tough it out, and so did the teachers. About 7.8, let's round it off, to 8% of the children aged 4 to 17 have ADHD. What does that mean? Well, if 8 out of 100, that would be what? 4 out of 50? That would be 2 out of 25? That would be 1 out of 12. So if you have a class of 12 students, probably one of them is going to be maybe not severe, but a little ADHD. So you better learn something about it and learn how to help those kids learn to cope with things. And guess what society's solution is for this on page 309? Medication for ADHD is widely prescribed. Medications are widely prescribed. Why? Because it turns them into a little zombie. Shuts down the brain function. But side effects, people, if he's turning into a zombie so he won't be so hyper in class, he's probably not capable of paying attention to what's going on in here either. You follow me? Mm-hmm. So now I've just set him up to not be able to learn what we're doing. And I know from my grade school experience, teachers got tired of it. Tommy, I just hear it. It just rings in my head. Tommy, sit still. And I thought, what was I doing? Tommy, stop fidgeting. And I'm thinking, what's fidgeting? Tommy, pay attention. And I'm thinking, should I reach in my pocket and get some money and offer to pay for something? Because I wasn't sure what was going on either. If somebody would have just said, you know what? You're just hyperactive. Let's figure out a way to deal with that. Let's see why I told my wife she better quit working to be a stay-at-home grandmother. when our daughters had little boys? Because I got to thinking, there could be some genetic predisposition for those two little boys to be hyperactive like their grandfather. And if they were, their mothers were going to have their hands full. I don't know, I don't think they are. I don't know. Maybe they're a little bit and I don't know it, or maybe they've learned how to handle it. Page 310 says, make sure the hyperactive kids understand procedures and allow them to be active. That's what the book says on page 310. And have daily home reports to their parents about how they're doing. Try to say good things as well as bad things. Speech disorders are treated by speech therapists. That makes sense on page 310. On page 311, language disorders result from hearing or speech impairments. See, a speech disorder is simply you need someone helping you learn how to pronounce all of your words and make the sounds. Language is how you take all the sounds and make sense out of it, and either they don't hear it or they don't speak it like other people do. Emotional and behavioral disorders are characterized by 5 things. Inability to learn that can't be explained by any other difficulty. Inability to build relationships. Inappropriate behavior. A pervasive mood of unhappiness. A tendency to develop physical symptoms if they don't get some help. Can you see where a child that has an emotional or a behavioral disorder, if they don't get some help with it, the thought of coming to school makes them feel sick? Is it Monday? Do I have to go to school? I feel ill, Mom, like I'm going to vomit. And try to be understanding about that when these kids aren't getting the help they need. So when I see someone with those characteristics, I say, what can I do to help them? Learn what you can about this stuff, and then figure out what you can do to get some special help for them somewhere. But try to, you see how, can we just try to be a little bit accommodating? A little bit accommodating. I had a hyperactive guy one time that said, Dr. Lonay, can I just stand in the back of the class here at the college years ago? Is it okay if I just stand up in the back? I do better when I'm standing up in terms of focusing on what the teacher's saying when I'm sitting down. I said, why not? But can you see that we have a tendency to say, no, everybody has to be in their assigned seat. And just like make some accommodations. Page 312, students with conduct disorders must also have some other recognized disability to receive special ed services. So it's just like if you're hyperactive, that's not considered special ed. If you have a behavior disorder, that's not considered special ed. And that's what prompted me to go to the university and take some of the courses I've taken that have to do with special ed, because I wanted to better understand some of these students. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be a special ed teacher. I don't want a degree in special ed. I just want to take some of the courses that they offer. Remember, hyperactive guy likes to go to school, thinks it's fun to take classes, likes math, just strange all the way around. And it's just like, and I learned some stuff about him. And I will tell you, my first thought was, you know what these behavior disorder kids need? They just need someone like my dad to grab them by the shirt and hold them up in the air a little bit and talk to them and put a little fear in them. And then when I took some courses and studied some of the homes and the environments and the situations these kids came from, it's like, no wonder they're a behavioral problem. They live in a big behavioral problem, and they don't know anything other than that. So I'm thinking I need to make some allowances and get to know them and spend some time with them and try to help them learn how to be, okay, it's like, see, I'm going to help them learn how to be better behaved so I won't have so many problems with them in class. No, I'm going to help them learn how to be successful in life. I'm going to help them acquire some life skills that they can use down the road to get along with other people. And the skills you help them acquire, they'll thank you for it down the road when they see how it reaps benefits for them. The best approach with behavioral disorders is to start with prevention. Do what you can to prevent an outburst, and then have a happy, emotionally supportive class where they feel welcome and where they can be successful. Help these people succeed. And don't roll your eyes when they walk in the room like, oh no. Page 313 talks about autism. Do any of you know any children that are autistic? 1, 2, 3. I have a friend who has an autistic child, and he said to me, some people at church feel sorry for us. But he said, what they don't know is all of my other children grow up, get married, and move away. And then he smiles and he says, my autistic daughter will be my little girl for the rest of my life.
Mm.
Is that kind of cool? And I thought, amen to that. This guy has a good perspective on that whole thing. Okay, page 314. 2200 vision or worse is considered legally blind. And if you're legally blind, you are disabled and you can get some help. Often it's a machine that magnifies everything because glasses won't do it for you, so you have to have a separate machine that magnifies things so you can read it. Page 315, hearing disabilities. Well, just get a hearing aid. I'm going, yeah, but my father-in-law had one, and boy, he just hated it. Apparently, if you're in a room with a whole bunch of people talking, a hearing aid will just drive you nuts. I don't know, because I don't have one, but I have a lot of my friends who tell me I need one. Why would they say that? Why would my friends tell me I need a hearing aid?
You don't think you can hear one?
What'd you say? And every time my wife says, Tom, we got to add in the paper for a free screening for a hearing aid. I said, what'd you say? And I don't know if you noticed this, but in class, when I ask questions, and some of you talking soft voices from the middle of the back of the room, I just walk down the middle of the classroom to get close to the people so I can hear what they're saying. Because people who talk softly, the letters the sounds run together, and I can't always hear what they're saying. And maybe I should get a hearing aid, but I'm not going to do it yet. I'll just, and you know what's funny? You guys, now that I'm an old guy, see, when I was younger, it was like embarrassing, but now that I'm really old and everybody knows it, it's like everybody makes allowances for the old guy now. So that's like, oh, he's just old, give him a break. Page 316 talks about gifted and talented. I used to think when I started teaching that I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to find out what all the great mathematicians, what their teachers did that helped them become great mathematicians. And then that's what I'll do with all of my gifted students in my classroom. I'll do that for them and they'll become great mathematicians someday. So I go to the library and start researching how did great mathematicians become so great and what did their teachers teach them? Anybody want to guess what I found in my research?
What?
Great mathematicians didn't need me guiding them down the math trail. They were already down the road. They just need me giving them books to read and look at that will let them just go as far as they want to go. Mm-hmm. So if you have a gifted or a talented person in your classroom, in fact, we had a friend of ours at church say one time to us, your daughter's in my Sunday school class. I said, and? They said, and did you know that she would probably qualify for the gifted and talented school that we have here in Peoria? And I said, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. He said, well, why don't you put her in it? I said, because I want her to have a Christian education. He said, yeah, but won't she be deprived? I said, if I put her in the gifted program, will she be deprived of anything? And he said, no. I said, I don't think so. I don't think she's going to get all that Christian education that she's getting at the Christian school. And besides, the Christian school teachers, they recognize her ability. So what do? They just give her advanced stuff for her to study on her own and keep going. And didn't hurt her one bit. So I'm thinking just if you have a gifted or a talented person in your room, Just make some accommodations for them, just like you do for the ones who need special help, for the ones who could just go on. And when I went to school with my grandson for Grandfather's Day one time, he's sitting there and the teacher's teaching math, and he runs through he whips out his homework real fast, and he just gets up, and I'm going, Stephen, she's still talking. He said, it's okay. She stopped talking to me. She's teaching everybody else. She knows I already have this stuff down. She knows I can figure it out on my own. She just lets me get my lesson done, then go over to the bookshelf and pull some books off that I work on that look interesting to me. Was that cool that teacher did that with him? And it was just an understood agreement that he just got to do that. And I thought, how cool is that? Page 317, just be aware of Public Law 94142, passed in 1975, and IDEA, IDEA, passed in 1990. And here's basically what they say. The 94142 says school districts must provide special education to children with disabilities. And IDEA in 1990 said students must be assigned to the least restrictive environment. Because what was going on is if someone had a little bit of a disability, they put them in a special ed classroom and they didn't have contact with the rest of the students, which means they weren't learning how to function in the larger world. And so someone came along in 1990 and said, no, we have to address this issue too. But why do you think there was a law passed in 1975 that said school districts must provide special education to children with disabilities? Okay, let me ask you this question. If you don't know why they passed that law, let me ask you what you think school districts were doing in 1975 with disabled students.
Shoved them in the corner and just left them there.
That's exactly right, Annalie. They were doing nothing for them. And that's when they passed a law that said you have to do something for them. And then when they said, we don't have any money to do it, the federal government said, we will fund Public Law 94142 and make money available for you to spend it on those children. And that's when they started putting all these kids in there to get federal money who ought to be in a normal classroom, with getting some special help with maybe math or reading or something. And they just started dumping them all in there that had any kind of problem at all. And that's why they had to, in 1990, pass the IDEA rule. IDEA students must be assigned to the least restrictive environment.
My dad was caught in the middle of all of that.
As a teacher?
No, as a student.
As a student, yeah.
It was, for some of his classes, he was sent to a special ed classroom, but he could think he had dyslexia, and so he was fine, but, so they sent him to a special ed classroom, but then the teachers, since he was fine, the teachers focused on the other students, and so he didn't get anything from special ed classrooms.
Yeah.
So he went to a normal classroom, but he just needed a little extra help in the normal classrooms, and the teachers wouldn't give it to him. So at this point, he has like a 4th grade education, even though he graduated high school.
Yep. And it's just like, and what's frustrating is he's probably figured out ways to compensate for his dyslexia.
Yeah, he has.
And it's just like, shame on the school for not doing what they could have done back then to help him.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. It's that people got caught in that, and it's just too bad. Page 319. How come I said screenshot page 318? What's on page 318 that I said screenshot? You guys introduced me to a brand new concept. I've acquired a new vocabulary word, so I'm using it. I'm reading through this book, and I'm saying, write down, tell them to screenshot that. Oh, the key components. Okay, and the reason for that is, here's why I said screenshot that. Because down the road, if you decide to go to graduate school someday, you go, I don't think I'll do that. Well, it doesn't hurt to put this someplace on a flash drive or on your little website or out there in the cloud and say, someone's going to ask you about that. And that's a nice little picture of it. And why did I say screenshot 319? An array of special ed services. So you can find all the kind of services that are available for special ed kids, so you know how to encourage families with a special ed child to get some of the help they need. Page 319 talks about class help in the classroom, to collaboration between the special ed teacher and the classroom teacher, to a resource room on page 320, to special ed classes with part-time inclusion. Page 320 and 322, the process of preparing an IEP. Do you know any children who have an IEP, an individualized education program? Okay, every child who qualifies for special ed, the government requires that they write an IEP for that child. So that's what that is. And page 323 shows the flow chart of an IEP. If you have any interest in special ed, or if you have a special ed kid that you're going to be working with who has an IEP, it would be worth your time to screenshot some of this stuff too. Page 327 talks about inclusion, and that's simply, what is inclusion? It's just including children with disabilities in the regular classroom as much as you possibly can. A key element in effective inclusion on page 328 is maintaining close coordination between the classroom teacher and the special ed teachers, or for the classroom teacher to learn something about the things that special ed teachers study. Page 329 and 330, effective strategies for students with disabilities. So what can you do to help a child who has a learning disability? If you happen to have a friend who has a child on an IEP and you want to help them with their schoolwork, number one, simplify the learning activities. Break things down to just a little piece at a time. Isolate the important concepts and teach them how to isolate important concepts. Not just be flooded with a whole mess of information, I have to know it all. Find alternatives to reading. What's the alternative to reading? Books on tape? Someone reading it to them? Lots of pictures? Give them extra time to complete assignments. Often, that's part of their frustration. If you think you have something that's going to take more time than you have time, have any of you taken tests where you were timed on the test and you couldn't finish the test before you ran out of time? Wasn't that fun? I mean, it just ties a knot in your stomach, doesn't it? To say, what? And it's like, you're not supposed to answer all the questions. They're trying to put more questions there that you can answer, because if you answer them all, they don't know how much you know, and they want to have enough questions to measure as far as you can go with it. Well, that just frustrates me that I couldn't answer all the questions. Well, just understand that you're not supposed to answer them all. And then that means when you're helping a child with a test, take away the frustration of running out of time. Multiple means of letting learners show what they know. Teach learning strategies, how to take notes, how to write summaries, how to memorize information. Tutor them, put them in small groups, give them computer-assisted instruction. Page 332, figure 12.7. What's that all about? 332. No, that's what it says. 332. No, 332, 12.7. Sure enough, adaptive technologies for students with disabilities. Peer tutoring, special ed teams, social integration. I don't know how much of that you need to have filed away. But I did notice this. There's a whole bunch of MyLab stuff in this chapter. Did you notice that? He's loaded this up with MyLab stuff. So that means I don't have to spend as much time with it. I can move on to the next chapter. That's a chapter, the last one, is something you need to know some stuff about and where to go find things. This chapter, Assessing Student Learning, on page 338. I don't think I've had you do this any other time. Would you look at page 338 in your textbook and look at the chapter outline? What are instructional objectives? Does anyone know the answer to that question?
Instructional objectives. They're an overview of what you hope to accomplish for a unit.
What's a planning lesson objective?
What you hope to accomplish for that particular lesson.
What's aligning objectives with assessment?
You go ahead. I'll stop talking.
Your lesson is so that you can test them later. It aligns with what their assessment is going to be at the end.
So your lesson and your assessment are going to be matched up
So they can learn what they need.
using taxonomies of instructional objectives. Taxonomies?
Blooms.
Bloom? Have you seen Bloom's taxonomy anywhere? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes? Yes? Where have you seen it?
Education courses.
What class?
Literally all of them.
Really?
This is my first class.
So maybe my handout today is a waste of time.
No, because I don't really remember what it was. You think I do.
Ah.
I forget.
Well, maybe I'll go ahead and give it to you, just for the fun of it.
For kicks and giggles.
Bloom's taxonomy. Do any of you remember anything about Bloom's taxonomy?
I've never heard of it before.
Oh, right. Okay.
Let's see.
It's the different levels of like not necessarily learning, but like processing information. There's knowledge and then comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation.
There you go. That's in this chapter, isn't it? Bloom's taxonomy. Everybody's in love with the Bloom. Can you tell what this is? The knowledge level. From knowledge to comprehension to application to analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. And a definition of what they mean by knowledge. And then look at this. This is why I gave this to you. Sample verbs. So let's just take one of those words from the sample verbs. You pick one. And use that verb in a sentence to state an instructional objective.
I would like my children to be able to recognize these sight words.
Recognize. There you go. Somebody else pick one of those words and just blurt out an instructional objective.
I want my students to be able to outline the basic concepts covered in class.
I want my students to outline. Someone pick another word and use it in an instructional sentence. I want my students to
Memorize the states and their capitals.
memorize the states and their capitals. Somebody else, pick one of those words under sample verbs under knowledge.
I want my students to be able to list their vocabulary words.
To list their vocabulary words. So, are we all done with this? Okay, the people who didn't volunteer to say something at the knowledge level, we are now down to the comprehension level. See that list of verbs for comprehension? The longer you put this off, the higher up the Bloom taxonomy we go. So use one of those words in a instructional sentence. I want my students to.
I want my students to summarize the information covered in this passage.
Good. Somebody else? Now, if you've already given one, you can give one here too, because it's fun to move up the ladder. But if you haven't given one, I'm expecting to hear from you.
I want my students to be able to recognize the pattern that they see in the information.
Good. Oh, they took your word? Well, then pick another one. There's a whole bunch of verbs there. Aren't these verbs cool to have this whole list of verbs? I mean, you can write instructional objectives all day. You see how when you start writing instructional objectives, you can kind of get stuck in a rut and you go, with this chart nearby, whoa, I got a ton of verbs I can use. So let's go down to application. Application.
I would like my students to be able to construct the sight words that they saw.
Say it again.
I'd like my students to be able to construct the sight words.
Construct a sentence with the sight words in it.
Mhm.
Ah, there you go. Good. See what we're doing? We're trying to make them use this stuff to do something with it. So let's move down to analysis. Someone give me a learning objective with an analysis verb in it. I didn't know this would be this hard. I gave you some applesauce. Do I have to take the applesauce back?
Like the children to be able to sketch one of the 50 states.
I want them to sketch one of the 50 states. All right. How cool is that? All right, let's move down to synthesis. Whoa.
I want my students to be able to develop an application to information we discussed in class.
Yeah, to develop an application. You're asking them to take what you've discussed in class and move back and do something at a lower level. That's a good one. Remember I had you measure those angles of that triangle early on? I want my students, if I wanted you to think at this level, I could have said, I just want you to measure those angles.
Mm-hmm.
But I can say, I want you to formulate a mathematical theory for the sum of the angles of a triangle. You go, I don't have to formulate one. There's one in my math book. Don't you know? There's a rule that says the three angles of a triangle always add up to
180.
180.
I remembered that when we were doing that.
And isn't that cool? See, it's just like you can either memorize the rule back here at the knowledge level from a math book, or you can measure angles and discover it as a class where you're taking them up to a higher level of thinking. That's what these are called, levels of thinking. It goes from the lowest up to the highest. So what's evaluation? Pick one of those evaluation verbs and give me a learning objective.
I'd like my students to be able to argue their side of the Civil War.
All right, good. Now you go, hey, wait a minute. They have summarize for evaluate and summarize for synthesize. Well, it's a different kind of summary, isn't it?
And summarize for comprehension.
Yeah, and summarize for comprehension. So it's just like, I want them to summarize this level, I want them to summarize at this level, I want them to summarize at this level. The evaluation would be, what are the pros and con arguments? Summarize the pros and cons of this particular, or summarize who says it's good, who says it's bad. Down one is summarize, the sentence would be take all this information and pull it back together in a summary statement. All right, okay, now that you've done that one, I just thought it'd be fun, because there it is, Bloom's taxonomy. It's just what it says right there on your paper. So I'm going to give you another one, and it says the same thing. Bloom's taxonomy. And all I want you to do with this one is just compare it with the one you already have. Compare and contrast. Oh, what level of Bloom's thing am I doing now by that? Which one of those has compare and contrast? Where is that word? Is it on your chart there? Is compare
Understand.
and contrast? So, let's do a little comparison. Oh, I just can't resist talking about this stuff. It's so much fun. Let's do a little comparison and a little contrasting. So pull them both up here. What? So, what are some differences between these two sheets of paper? Okay.
One is landscape and one portrait.
What?
One is landscape and one is portrait.
All right. Because see, I'm going, one of them goes down the left and the other one goes across the top. What's that all about? Why are they messing with me? Okay, which do you prefer? Which one do you like better? Which one is more aesthetic?
There's more information in this one, but I like this one.
I like the
Isn't
fact that
that
it's on here.
something?
I like how there's
Alphabetized
empty
colors.
space.
You guys
Not
like
gonna
the, you like the one with the stuff across the top?
But this one doesn't have sample behaviors. I would like to point out.
Which one?
This one has sample
lie.
behaviors.
This one
This
does
one's more helpful on the contextual.
Oh yeah, this one has the sample behaviors on the right, and the other one doesn't have that.
This one has alphabetized.
Say, what'd you say again?
This one has the words alphabetized. I like that.
Well, that does help, doesn't it?
Oh,
It's
that is kinda
aesthetic.
nice.
The other one didn't have?
No, I think the
I thought the first one had them alphabetized.
No, very much.
A-D-I-L-M.
No. Look at the second one. Comprehension.
Yeah, you're right.
They're very much
Oh.
not.
Yeah, you're right. Classify.
The first one is.
Yeah, the first one is.
Which is interesting.
They
Yeah.
made the first one
And
and
they're
then they
like,
were
this
bored.
is too much work.
So what's the lowest level on the one that you all like? Or most of you like? Some of you haven't picked one you like yet. Just look
Oh,
up and
yeah,
say.
because there are certain taxonomies that switch the last two and have different words for it too.
So
There's
what's
bloom and
the
something
word
else.
for the first the lowest level?
Remembering.
Remembering on this one, and what is it on the other one?
Knowledge.
Knowledge.
Interesting.
And you could
I like
circle a
these
word
words
on the one that says knowledge. See that word students recall? That has to do with recalling and recognizing.
And on this one, it has the last two switched around, which some people do. I mean, they have synthesis first on here. They have synthesis last on here.
Yeah, what's that all about? Oh, it's called the revised Bloom's taxonomy. In parentheses with alphabetized words. So they both use the same word understanding? No. Understanding on this one is called what on the other one?
Comprehension.
Comprehension. Applying, application, applying, that's the same. Analysis
And analyzing.
and analyzing. So do you like using ing words?
No, I like this one better.
You like that one? Annalie likes that one better. Okay, hold up the one you like best. I'm just curious. If you like them both equally, hold them both up.
No.
One,
Probably this one.
This one looks cleaner.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2. Well, there you go. Everybody has a preference.
Oh.
Good. So I gave you something you can do something with somewhere. All right, let's run down this chapter outline some more. Did we stop at using taxonomies?
Mm-hmm.
Research on instructional objectives? Why is evaluation important? Can you answer that question? Why is evaluation important?
Otherwise, you won't know if they learned anything.
Okay.
Tests for retention. Not necessarily.
Okay.
Just
Determine who gets to retain, who gets promoted. How is student learning evaluated? Do you know the difference between formative and summative evaluations?
I did.
Do you know the difference between something forming and then something
Summarize.
gelling or summarizing at the end? Forming is in the process. It's assessment while you're in the process, and summation is at the end. Norm reference, criterion reference, you know the difference?
Norm and criterion.
Yeah, norm reference and criterion reference.
Norm is more abstract. Criterion is pretty concrete.
Okay. Matching evaluation strategies with your goals. How are tests constructed? Whoa, that'll be helpful. We better get cracking on this stuff, hadn't we? Yeah, that's right, I run out of time. Page 338. 339. Oh, that little story about Mr. Sullivan's lesson on the Civil War. Look what the textbook said on page 339. As engaging as Mr. Sullivan's lessons are, there is little correspondence between what he is teaching and what he's testing. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever had a teacher that you were having so much fun in the class, and then they gave you a test, and there was very little, if any, correlation between what was going on in the classroom and what you were tested on?
I hate that so much.
And what did you just say? What's the word that she just used? What verb? No, what word did she use? I hate that. I hate that. Don't do that to kids. Just don't do that to kids. Make a high correlation between what you're teaching and what you're testing. Just make a point to do that. What do you want your students to know? What do you want them to be able to do? Setting out course objectives at the beginning of a course, this is on page 340, is an essential step in providing a framework for individual lessons. I have to say, where are we going to go in this class and what we're going to do? An instructional objective, sometimes called a behavioral objective, because you're going to see how the students behave, is a statement of skills or concepts that students are expected to know at the end of the lesson. Examples of measurable objectives. Did he give some of those on page 340? Yeah, he's given examples all over the place. Given 100 division facts, students will give correct answers to all 100 in 3 minutes. Yeah. Have any of you ever been given a little time test, a little sheet of paper that says you have 3 minutes to answer all the questions?
Mm-hmm.
Did you hate those too? Maybe that's why you don't like math, because they pushed you too hard on this time stuff. When asked, the students will name at least 5 functions that characterize all living organisms. So he's given some examples. Writing instructional objectives. what's the performance that I want, and what's the criteria. Did you notice that? The performance, I want them to answer correctly 100 division facts, and I want it to be 100% to 100, all of them in 3 minutes. I'm thinking 100% accuracy in 3 minutes is probably too much. Lighten up a little bit. Give them like 80% accuracy and give them 4 or 5 minutes. No, they have to have this stuff memorized. Well, if you think it's important, then you better make sure you teach it and take time for them to learn it before you test it. And if you're going to test it, you better teach it. And if it's important enough to teach it, do you want to test over it? Page 341. Oh, it says discuss table 13.1. Oh, we did. No, we didn't. The definition, the question answered, the example. That might be worth screenshotting right there. Writing instructional objectives. The conditions, the performance, and the criteria. On 341, planning lesson objectives. The skeleton of a behavioral objective is condition, performance, criterion. State the condition under which learning will be assessed as in the following. So there's a whole bunch of examples there. You probably ought to screenshot some of these examples so when you start writing objectives, you have something to look at as a pattern and a reference. And after you've written objectives for a while, do you understand? It just kind of becomes second nature to write them. Then what happens is you get stuck in a rut, keep using the same verbs over and over and over again. That's why I gave you that handout. Because with that list of verbs, you can always find some new verbs to use when you're doing this stuff. All right, page 342 is where we'll start next time. Good. If we get this far today, we will be able to finish this book by Friday.
I will not be here Friday. I am taking off, heading out, whatever, early to surprise my little
And
sister. At her concert.
if you get to wherever you're going and you go, I wonder what they did in class, you can just go,
I'll watch
it'll
the
be
video.
uploaded to Canvas. I can watch it there.
Oh,
I just want to know, you know.
Yeah, and I can't be here on Wednesday, so do I just need to watch it and then
So just
email
watch
you?
it on Canvas and send me an email and tell me what we talked about, and I'll mark you present. One time somebody said, what if nobody shows up? Well, see, the camera doesn't show you, it just shows me.